Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Bringing Tech to Treatment panel at Biointegrates. I'm Jeff Davison. I'm CEO of BioNow, which is the life science membership organisation focusing on the north of England. Along with One Nucleus, we're delighted to have worked in collaboration with Life Science Integrates to bring this conference to you today. Okay, moving on to the panel, we're going to explore some of the challenges and opportunities which technology can bring to healthcare. In terms of discussions, these will consider technology in its really widest sense. So it'll include therapeutics, diagnostics, instrumentation, wearables, and probably a lot more than that. So I'd like to just start by beginning to ask each of the expert panel members we've got with us today to introduce themselves. I'll ask them first just to ask them to introduce themselves, what they do, and then make a couple of points establishing the current state of the art or key opportunities and challenges as they see them. So to begin with, according to the billing on the website, I'd like to ask Gerald Law, who is Chief Executive of Innovation DB, to introduce himself. I'll ask them first just to ask them to introduce themselves, what they do, and then make a couple of points establishing the current state of the art or key opportunities and challenges as they see them. So to begin with, according to the billing on the website, I'd like to ask Gerald Law, who is Chief Executive of Innovation DB, to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Gerald, and I run something called Innovation DB, which is a global database of technologies from about 5,000 research institutions around the world that we provide to institutions and companies that are interested in developing technologies. I'm Gerald, and I run something called Innovation DB, which is... I'm afraid I have the most incredibly large and loud echo, and I can't talk in this way, so I'm going to have to stop and see if it can be sorted out. Apologies.
Okay, no worries, Gerald. Let's move on to Nicola Herron, who is Head of Collaborative R&D at the Medicines Discovery Catapult.
So just a quick introduction. So I've worked in healthcare technology for over 22 years. So I started my career as a medicinal chemist in drug discovery, working in large pharma. And then for the later half of my career, I've worked in organizations who are there to support innovators to develop their assets, whether that be new drug molecules for the clinic or technologies to support drug discovery. So at the moment, my key role within Medicines Discovery Catapult is Head of Collaborative R&D. So the Catapult is one of Innovate UK's network of catapults. Our particular focus is on supporting the medicines discovery sector. And how we do that is that we work in partnership with innovators right across the different sectors to help them get their assets quicker to the clinic. We also play a national role in connecting people to other organisations or people within the innovation ecosystem to ensure that we are always pulling together the best brains around some of these key challenging problems we've got. So within the sector at the moment, I see massive opportunities in continuing to grow opportunities for people to work within a partnership approach. If we can work to facilitate bringing together industry and academic sector with the deep patient and clinical insight from charities and patient groups, we've got the best opportunity of bringing industrial rigour to make sure we've got the right technology and a real understanding of the problem to be solved. So I think there's great opportunity there to harness a lot of the organisations that are out there to try and pull that together. One of the biggest challenges within pharmaceuticals still remains the failure rates within the clinic. And a great need and an area of science that we really need to be pushing is better predictive models so that you could be working on human models that better predict the clinical outcome to de-risk molecules before they enter the clinic.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, I believe Gerald fixed his technical issues now. So Gerald, do you want to finish off your introduction?
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, for a chap who's here as a sort of technologist, that's pretty embarrassing, but there you go. Anyway, so we gather data from all over the world and link it to companies of all sorts that want to find leading edge technology and take it to market. And so although I lack the point of detail expertise that for sure the other people on this panel have, I have a very broad view on the application of emerging technology to real life applications. I also, serve on the investment committee of venture capital firms and things like that, and been on a director and non-exec on a bunch of startup companies. So I'm passionate also that an awful lot of technology does not get to market that should. And it's all about what are the correct mechanisms to make sure that the brilliant stuff that is being discovered and invented and nurtured actually finds real applications. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerald. Now we've got Eddie Blair, who's chairman of Virokine Therapeutics.
Yep. So yeah, indeed, my name's Eddie Blair. Until recently, I was chair of Virokine Therapeutics. I'm no longer chair there, but in fact, I've become a trustee board member of the Quadrum Institute. And I believe Quadrum are co-sponsoring this, Jeff, as well. I'm also a contracted in biomarker specialist at UCB Pharma. And I guess my background initially as a virologist, and then became really interested in testing to guide treatments for viruses. That got me into personalized medicine. And more recently, I've been out of pharma for a number of years, ran some biotechs and startups, came back into pharma on a contract basis so I could do some of the other stuff as well, including helping SMEs. And I guess, one of the things I see, and it kind of builds on what Nicola and Gerald have said, is one of the challenges I see in getting tech to make a difference to treatment is around the adoption piece. So getting the patient to really understand what they're being offered and to make them want that. In part of that adoption is ensuring that there's an attractive procurement offering as well. So really, that's a kind of detailed bit in the chain. But the last bit for me is wonderful tech, fantastic clinical studies, but if no one wants it or understands why they want it, then that's a challenge. So that would be my problem statement, Jeff.
Great. Hopefully we'll explore a little bit of that later, Eddie. I'm sure it's a great start. Thank you. Okay, now we've got Ewan Cameron, who is Chief Executive and founder of Cohesion Medical. And I hope I can see from your title on your screen, Ewan, that you're still in that position. So off you go.
Thank you, Jeff, I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Fantastic to be here. I'm Ewan Cameron. I'm the CEO and founder of Cohesion. We're a pioneering digital health solutions company based in Scotland. My background's quite mixed. I've got quite a multidisciplinary skill set from bioengineering, system science, and quite a bit of computational biology. My first startup was 30 years ago, hard to believe these days, where I kind of grew a bit tired with academic research and wanted to move lab data into real world data. Over the last 20 years, I've been working on building and developing AI-driven digital health solutions for a variety of partners, mostly to allow clinical and research trial management, particularly around biologics and disease-modifying drugs, a bit on bioinformatics and data analytics, and also along on early detection and screening for cancer and inflammatory diseases. But what always puzzled me when I was doing these for other partners was how much the patient story and the patient voice and actually the patient data was never really being fully captured whenever these engagements, whether they were clinical or research, were going on. And I just felt that there was a huge amount of real world data that was never being captured. So that was the motivation for me to found Cohesion 8 years ago, how to develop better patient health experiences, more outcomes-based, more value-driven health. We developed quite an innovative innovation award-winning technology platform, CDR system, which is Condition Early Detection and Risk. And we've applied it to a couple of specialisms now in inflammatory diseases as well as cancer, and most recently looking at brain health. If I can echo probably Eddie and Nicola's kind of view of kind of exciting times we're living in, COVID's not the best of times, but we can see opportunities around the challenges that's presented, in particular the increase in real-world evidence capture, allowing much more efficient real-time monitoring. I think has been quite a significant breakthrough on a global scale. And I think this will deliver quite transformative health experiences for citizens around the world, as well as potentially delivering more resilient health systems, as well as perhaps like providing some insights into quite novel systems biology models. And that's probably taken me back to my early academic interests, where I've still got a PhD to finish.
Fair, thanks, Ewan. That's great. Okay, and now to round off our panel, we've got Detlef Behrens, who is Managing Director at Bay Pharma. Detlef.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, so as a background, I'm always stating I have learned something solid. I'm a pharmacist, and then I spent most of my life so far in sales, contract manufacturing, and that was, I'd say, you see a lot different companies, as well a lot of biotechs and larger pharma companies working on new compounds, new formulations, and everything. I moved then into procurement, and one role was there as well to buy innovation. So I was actively looking to see if something interesting, exciting, differentiating just was able or was out in the market. And then I think in 2017, together with a business partner, I founded Bay Pharma, and we just finished successfully phase 3 study of an innovative dermatology product, which we will then license out as a classical biotech business model. And so that means, okay, over the years, there was a lot, I think, interaction on innovation, on thoughts, okay, what patients could require. And as well, I've seen a lot projects which I believe failed because there was no focus on the patient requirements and the patient needs, which is a shame. And I think we as a pharma industry need to do things completely differently and think differently, I think, to make that really happen and to create enough value.
Brilliant, thanks very much for those intros. So we're really keen to make this as interactive and as possible. So for the audience members watching, please do pose any questions, comments, thoughts, especially if you disagree with what we're saying. Submit these via the chat box, and I'll pass them on to the panel, and we'll have a discussion about them. So I don't have any of those yet. So let's start by a question from me. I think a few of you have talked about the need, and maybe we can talk about how we identify unmet clinical need and how we enable innovators to really understand what the clinical needs are more fully. Who would like to start us on that one? Eddie, do you want to go to you first there?
Okay, I'll unmute. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like we're talking about in the past. It's about translation services in many ways. And what I did when I was in pharma was engage with a lot of diagnostics companies, and I found that diagnostics language was a lot different from pharma language, just in what they meant by certain phrases and terms and stuff like that. And it strikes me as that's one of the challenges really of getting technology into the marketplace, if you like, to start generating revenues, is translating the benefit that the scientists and the technologists have produced in using whatever evidence they've gathered through clinical trials or other outreach activities, and translating those into a language and a meaning that, you know, Detlef talked about procurement, I mentioned procurement, language that procurement people can understand, and eventually patients as well, because again, having worked in HIV, patient voice has an enormous way of pulling stuff into the market. So as well as the technology push, I know this is old phraseology, as well as technology push, the patient pull can be something really quite engaging. We saw that initially in HIV, I guess, but more recently at Bristol Myers, when I was working on immuno-oncology, we saw a tremendous pull for patients for this exciting new approach to managing tumours. So in one of the jobs that I had at Bristol Myers was trying to translate that scientific information into something that can be quite promising. And you can see how that failure to translate can fail to work. If you look at the last discussion about the COVID lockdown, Boris went straight to the technologists, the scientists, to explain something without actually doing any translation activities before that. So I do think the translation activities is very important.
Yeah, you made a good comment, Eddie. When I'm looking into procurement, I think they are very often in charge of, let's say, buying new things as well, and they are part of the finance organization. So their strategy is cost saving. So when you, let's say, in a classical organization, if you have to go to procurement, then it's not a discussion about, okay, is there something innovative? Is that creating a value? It's about how cheap can I get it? And what I like now is I think a lot of pharma companies now start just creating an innovative or innovation department, which is really start focusing on innovation and trying to get that in with the right, I think, understanding and connecting, let's say, the market, meaning the patients, with the scientists. And as well, I think for sure, I think ideas are key. Is that will that product which is coming out of that be marketable from a cost perspective? It's clear, I think, we can't just, I think, develop products which are horribly expensive and no one is able to pay for it. That's not the value I think we should create. But I think that there need to be a cost element as well. But if someone is really focusing or looking on these things holistically and not just how cheap can I get it, then I think we can make a good step forward into the right direction.
I think that Ewan and Nick both want to come in. Nick, do you want to go first, then Ewan? Or Ewan's on either way.
No, I totally agree with Detlef and Eddie there. I think actually there's probably, from how we perceive it, as the unmet clinical need is often confused with the unmet clinical want, and I think the confusion is really due to the fact that we exist in a multi-stakeholder environment, and specifying requirements is usually a stakeholder need rather than all the stakeholders. And I think that single stakeholder need is really a single stakeholder want, whereas actually what we need to do is shift the paradigm to a kind of a much more inclusive approach to what are the real needs, and that, as has been said earlier, really needs the patient involved at the early stage. Sorry, Nicola.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's really essential, and having a structure in place to facilitate the patient voice early on, I think, is very important. And one of the initiatives that we've put in place over the last couple of years is to develop what we're calling drug discovery syndicates, which are a consortia of people interested in a particular area anchored around a research charity. So, for example, we've got a hearing medicines discovery syndicate where we're working with the charity and patients to really understand what are the challenges you want to see future drugs address, and not just what's going to be the next big blockbuster, but really what are the key problems that you're living with that you really want to see a solution to. So by anchoring around a charity, we're building a consortium, we're bringing in academics, we've got SMEs, and really it's an open innovation forum for people who are interested in the areas that we're focused on to join the consortium and get first-hand understanding of the clinical requirements, the patient requirements, the challenges to get these things into the NHS, share your technology challenges, and really have that little ecosystem coalescing around a shared problem. And so that's an area that we are actively pursuing, because we think that gives, it sort of democratizes the drug development process. It gives even someone a brand new spin out the same access to really understanding the bigger picture as maybe some of the larger farmers might take for granted.
Thanks, guys. And Gerald, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my only comment, obviously reinforcing what everybody else has just been saying, which is not great for the panel, I suppose, but to put a slightly different spin on it, I mean, the tools exist. You know, there is now the opportunity through widespread communication, ubiquitous personal communication, and big data and analytics tools to do a hell of a lot more to identify needs, whether the pharma companies or anybody else are even vaguely aware of it. And I mean, I think, you know, Eddie was mentioning, you know, COVID as an example. Well, I mean, early in the year, everybody was desperately trying to buy every incubator, you know, breathing apparatus that could be found on the planet. And then it turned out, of course, only because they dealt with tens of thousands of people, that what you actually do is lay them on their stomach and give them something that thins the blood, you know, pretty, you know, crudely, yeah. But that comes from vast amounts of data with lots and lots of people, and that is there, and that is not being embraced. In fact, where it gets discussed in these kinds of conferences, it's usually as an evil threat that Google and Apple are going to try and disintermediate, you know, medical systems and own all the patients and you know, and I say, as someone who's interested in the processing of larger amounts of data, it seems to me that if you're trying to find unmet clinical needs, and obviously all the patient groups and stuff we're talking about is perfect, well, you could be doing that on a massive scale and trying to find some mechanisms to build that into the other stuff that everyone's mentioning.
Okay, thanks. So it sounds like we've got a challenge around communication, really, you know, speaking similar languages, whether it's patients, whether it's technology providers and developers of different types. So is there any ways that we might explore, or is there any technologies out there that can help with that you're aware of?
I think for me, I think I sometimes think is we don't need to, there's not always so much new technology required, I think, to come to a good solution. It's sometimes pretty easy, just switch on your brain. And I think that's sometimes, honestly, this is sometimes what I'm missing. As I said, we are active in the field of dermatology, and I can give you just two examples from the past and a bit actual as well. So there was a company, a new chemical entity, Topical Formulation for atopic dermatitis. And they just came back with at the end of the day, it was something like a Vaseline ointment. And I think that we said, yeah, what do you want with that formulation? Yeah, that's then there's the best stability for the active. Yeah, but I think no patient of atopic dermatitis will ever use, I think, Vaseline as a base of an ointment. So we just send them back, said, is okay, start talking to the patients, what they would love to get as a formulation. And then I think from there, I think, okay, then it's a challenge, okay, to create a stable formulation with the active in. And the other one was, okay, it's a product against difficult to heal wounds. So open wounds, and the company says, yeah, we have already some data in a formulation, and it's containing zinc oxide, which is completely contraindicative for open wounds. So, and I think I thought, okay, if people want to build up a company, want to put millions of money into development, why they not start thinking 10 minutes about, okay, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense? So in that sense, I think they are burning millions of money for nothing, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, especially, I mean, but they've obviously got over a hurdle to raise that millions, you know, to sound like, so, you know, it does seem like a disconnect, doesn't it, really? So Gerald, your platform, you know, you were talking about how you sometimes enable people to utilize the platform better just by, you know, talking to them about the way that the search terms they're using and the sort of the way they're describing their need.
Absolutely. So to drill into that from our point of view, we've got thousands, literally thousands of sources from all over the world. They're in many languages. They're also from different segments of the same industry or different industries completely. And the same bit of technology, consequently, can be described in a whole range of different ways, which is profoundly unhelpful to people understanding the thing that's being described. So we deliberately describe things in terms of our classification in ways that is not industry specific. Yeah, so it makes sense to us. It's mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive and all those great things, but it's a completely separate set of categories that means that we can describe things in ways that people from any given sector probably wouldn't. And then we use tools like thesauruses and just training to get people to use a wide range of different synonyms when they start to search the data set. And the result of that is you cure some of the problems that come from the literal translation, language to language, but also the different ways in which things are expressed. And you get round the habit that some people, you know, label things as belonging to a given industry segment when they don't really. You know, the same basic technology is available across several different segments. They're just not aware of the other applications. And then, of course, if you're lucky enough to have a lot of results, well, you can always start to narrow it down from there. The risk is that you put in the 2 words that are particular to your company's description of a bit of tech and find you've only got 4 answers and think, well, what are the world's universities up to? They're not doing anything useful. When with a little bit of lateral thinking, you can come back with hundreds or even thousands of results that you know, then refine down. And in the process, you realize that actually there might have been a lot of work done on this area by an allied industry or an allied segment that you hadn't realized must be wrestling with the same project. And that, again, is a great enabler for bringing new technologies into areas of application, that you discover that you can borrow some other industries or other segments, technologies, and simply reapply it to your own situation. And you don't have to start again from scratch, though convincing, you know, the regulators that you can do that, of course, is sometimes more of a challenge. But the principle is still sound, yeah.
Nick, you wanted to step in there?
Yes, I wanted to take Gerald up on the invite to challenge him. So thinking about what you described, Gerald, it does sound like a fantastic facility, but can you imagine a patient interacting with that? Is that...
Well, sorry, that's a very fair question. So the data in our data set is mostly produced by scientists, and they tend to write in a particular way. So you're right that if the scientist hasn't done a good job of describing the areas of application in common language, then at some level you're going to need some technical description, even to do what I was just describing. That's true. However, you can still get a lot more out of it than you might expect. So if you've, say, got 10 different sources all describing the same thing in slightly different ways, and 3 of them describe some real world applications, even if the other 7 don't, then you soon get a nice little group of words that are relevant to the thing you're interested in, that are allied to the 3 that actually use some real world applications in their descriptions, and you find the other 7.
Okay.
You see, but I agree with you, need to help people along that process for sure.
I guess I'm just interested in the context. Are you thinking about a scenario where a patient has been told that they're not satisfied with the technology or treatment they've been offered and they want to do their own research? Is that the context?
Well, our customers are usually larger companies, R&D departments, and we're trying to help them just discover what is out in the world rather than patient groups. But there'll be no problem with, we do have some charitable organisations we give free access to, and they're always welcome to, as anybody else is, to ask for some support. So we would steer them through a few early searches to help them work out how to make use of the data. Yeah, well, we have a big project at the moment actually to try and do it output based back, and that is really difficult. But we are working on trying to make it to really use big data to see groups of associations around outputs associated with technologies, so that someone can put in an output and then it would lead back to different technologies that might lead to that output, and hence allow a non-expert to work backwards to find the technology streams that could be useful. But I'd be lying if I said we'd cracked that yet. We're just working on it. Great,
thanks. And you, I think you had a thought there.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to Detlef's point about engaging the brain and sort of reiterate Nicola's kind of view. I think we really need to engage the human, and the human is whether they're a patient, a clinician, or a scientist, they're still human. Maybe perhaps taking a less institutionalized approach to languages or sort of the language of training in medicine may actually allow some kind of a cross communication and in a much simpler and more accessible way. For example, we know patients who have eczema, which Detlef mentioned, but they also have Crohn's disease and may also have rheumatoid arthritis. So they're seeing 3 different specialists in rheumatology, dermatology, and gastroenterology, but effectively they're all inflammationologists. Now, I think if science started seeing biology in terms of systems, then actually that might filter through to how medicine is actually taught, and as a result, how patients are actually treated.
Thank you, that's cool. I don't believe we've got any questions from the audience yet, so if you've got any, please do submit them. Maybe
Jeff, I have
go ahead.
I think it's something just coming to my mind. So we are supporting a company. They have a very interesting vaginal device measuring the core body temperature. Known system, everything, but I think the current system is okay. You take out the vaginal device, take out the measuring cell, read it into an app, then you have all the data. And when we were just start talking to that company, my initial question was, yeah, but I think Bluetooth is much better. Perfect. And they said yes and no. They said, okay, even if you look across Europe, there are some, let's call them the more tech-affine countries like Scandinavia and so on. For them, I think Bluetooth is perfectly fine. If you go to the very conservative countries like Germany, a lot of reservation because, might be someone is able to read my data. So what is your perspective on, let's say, if we want to bring, I think, innovation to the patients? I think we have a very diversified patient population, which just want to see, let's say, the both extremes. What is the best approach here?
And maybe I can sort of widen that out to data and how use of data and whether patients trust us with that data. How do we sort of engender that trust, but also make it appropriate to the different audiences? Ewan, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I think my approach is not to be so binary that you're either all in or all out. You know, do I want to put my life on Facebook or not engage with Facebook at all? Or maybe I actually want something in between, and I might want to choose how in between and when in between. And I think the same should apply to health data and the use of citizen health data. And from a citizen perspective, as we're all citizens, I should have the right to choose, as I do when it comes to voting for elections, to change the party of choice, depending on what policies I have are presented to me, or my personal circumstances, or whatever. And I think the same comes to like health data. Like I think if individuals are empowered to actually configure what to share and how and by what means, I think that will allow people to buy or gain trust with who is the data aggregator, but at the same time ensuring that the individual has the right to kind of like opt out when it suits them or opt in. And I think technology is increasingly moving towards that more granular approach where, you know, breaking away from the sort of the binary of it's all or nothing. I don't think all or nothing is really what we want. A much more personalised approach to how data is shared and an ability to change that over time depending on how we feel or whether actually who we're sharing that data with, if it's a research institution or a big pharma, are they actually delivering on the promises on which they want me to give my data to them.
Eddie, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess one of the challenges around data is at what point and at what level do you give patients, and let's call them patients for now, but you could say individuals, do you give them the choice to make decisions around how their data might be used, for instance? So in some cases, and you know, Ewan's right, it's not always binary, but for instance, there's lots of people prepared to take a vaccine because they know it helps and they understand the benefits in herd immunity. But there's a whole other group of people who don't want to take the vaccine, not because they're necessarily concerned about the science behind it, but they want to make that choice. They want to be free to make that choice, and they don't want told to take the vaccine. And so, you know, you're walking a fine balance between educating people enough to make an informed decision, but not educating them in a way that they suddenly become scared and see negatives. So again, it goes back to communication and translation of information, if you like. And I find it quite strange because I've got no longer teenage, but youngsters as kids, and they seem so prepared to put all sorts of stuff on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, whatever. But then they also want to go in marches protesting about, people's freedom to choose, and Google and Microsoft not nicking their data. So there's a real need to try and get that evidence, if you like, out there to say, look, think of this in a positive way. It's about herd immunity. It's not about, taking away your individual rights. So that's kind of where what Ewan was talking about is key. And to be honest, is there a simple answer? I don't know, because you're talking sometimes with personality ranges, and that's a challenge.
If I may join in briefly, Jeff, please.
Sure.
I once gave a talk on the use of blockchain in healthcare data, and what I discovered was that no one really understood what blockchain was, even in that audience. So the next time, about a year later, somebody asked me to do a speak. I actually did a speech explaining what is blockchain and how it works. And I think that the real message that needs to be got out there is that the chap who invented Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto. And you may have heard of him. He's a legend in the sort of IT kind of world of big data and so on. He founded Bitcoin. This is hundreds of billions of dollars kind of currency now. Nobody knows who he is. Because if you set up your data systems in the appropriate way, using smart contracts and the other elements in a blockchain that can be implemented, the data owner can be kept absolutely private, even in something that is ubiquitously traded globally by millions of people. So, I mean, for me, the first and biggest challenge is not to talk about Facebook, where we know they're all, trying to make money out of it, let's put it crudely, but to help people understand what sort of cryptographic tools are now available to actually protect them and ensure them that these are being implemented by a body they probably can trust, like the health service. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't, how many people were worried that their doctors have access to their medical files on the NHS, for example? Probably none, but very few. And explain to them that if Satoshi Nakamoto can remain anonymous for 11 years, then their data around what medicines they might be taking can be absolutely safe too. So for me, it's about educating them about not about the issues of liberty or anything. It's about helping them understand a little bit enough about the technology to feel more confident in the system.
It seems like it coming back to communication and talking similar language or language others understand again, doesn't it? I think we're running down the time. I think we're doing all right for now. Maybe move on to adoption and how do we, it's the perennial challenge for innovators, or at least, it's one of the real barriers to commercialization. So is the view of technologists anyway. So what are the key sort of mistakes we make in adoption or getting through adoption, and how might we better address this when we're taking the technology to market? Detlef.
Yeah, I have a very interesting story to tell. So I had a meeting with a large pharma company, head of R&D, and I was asking him, I think, why are you using always the same technology? And I said, okay, relatively simple. We have invested a couple of millions or hundreds of millions into a certain technology. So we are now forced to develop all oral solid dosage forms with the same process to utilize the facilities. So that means it's okay. Clever scientists, I think, they would for sure come back with fantastic new ideas on significantly better formulations. But I think there was a corporate guidance, okay, you're only allowed to use one technology. So outcome is, okay, not what we're looking for, something, okay, which is fitting the patient needs. The outcome is something fitting the manufacturing capabilities. And I think that's as well, I think, my concern on large pharma. I think they are very often just stuck in their systems. They are up to a certain level interested in new technologies, but if it comes to the point of should we drive that forward now into registration, then there is more the concern, let's see if someone else is doing it, and if that's approved by the authorities, we might be interested, I think, to take it further on board. And I think if these companies are not, I think, willingly to really invest into new and probably disruptive innovation, I think we will stuck where we are, and we are not able to move forward. And that's my concern.
So technology push rather than patient pull there again. Anyone else want to have a go at that? Ewan or Eddie?
I was just thinking. I mean, Detlef makes a good point, because I think Gerald mentioned COVID-19 before, and I know we're going to try and talk about that. So, I mean, I see, the recent announcements around the RNA-based vaccines is really, for me, evidence that, an entirely novel, if not, quite desperate situation has allowed for something quite innovative to fast track through the development system to the point where it's almost ready. So I do think sometimes that desperation can be the mother of invention, as it were. So that's where I'm picking up on what Detlef's saying as well, that novel circumstances, novel events can create that opportunity. And I think BioNTech and Moderna should be rejoicing at the opportunity that's been created for them that might not have been the case, say, a year ago.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and Ewan, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'd probably just iterate Gerald's point about trust, and I think that's a failure that we need to remedy, and Nicola's point around listening to the patient. I think if you look at how many apps, health apps there are on the App Store, there's 500,000 plus. I think that also shows a failure, because it's very much a single pain point approach, when actually what patients really want is a much more connected, integrated and seamless approach to their health and their engagement with the treatments they receive in a way that is personalised to them. So I think if you want adoption, I think you need to make patients part of the solution.
Yeah. Can I just build on that then, Jeff? So I think, patients, or in the case of pharma, the end user, I think the challenge with adoption is around solving the right problem for the person who ultimately is going to use this thing. So solving the right problem with the right people around the table, so you understand the stakeholder requirements. You might have the best technology, but if you can't install it, let's say you're trying to set someone up to do home dialysis, you've got the best kit, you can't install it in their living room. The context of what you're trying to design for who, and bringing those people with you as you design it, develop it, then ultimately want to get it back into use. You need those guys as champions, as voices to pull it into use, I would say. And so I guess just to come back to that key point, that we do talk about patient need, but I think that's what's really important is you can make that much broader. It's end user need. Who's actually going to be using this? What do they need to see?
Brilliant. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's really important. Okay, we are starting to come to the end of our time. So can I just ask each of you to wrap up now? We didn't get through all the questions on COVID, etc. Shame, but I'm sure everyone will be talking about COVID and probably Brexit as well in the other sessions. So can we just ask you to wrap up one after the other in a short, snappy sort of tweet or a couple of sentences, please? I think maybe I'll start with Ewan. Can I start with you, please?
Sure. So if you want tweet-sized, real-world technology will drive future treatments.
Brilliant, thank you. Next on my screen, I've got Eddie.
Well, it goes back to the beginning. Provide the evidence. Get the excitement there to pull the technology through into the patient or end user use. And the key to that is, as I say, I think translatable understanding of what the offering is. So that would be mine.
Thank you. Great summary. Thanks. Nicola?
Just simply working together to understand both the problem and the solution.
Brilliant. Thanks. Detlef?
Yeah, so my hope is with the learning out of the COVID vaccine development, so we can develop something completely innovative in an extremely short time. If we can adopt this to future pharma developments, then I think we will have more time and more flexibility to focus on additional innovation and on patients.
Thank you. And Gerald?
I would say educate to build trust in the technologies that are already available to enable all of the approaches and all the different sets of problems that are being so beautifully articulated by the other panel members.
Thank you very much. That was great. And I had a really, really interesting discussion for me. I had a lot about patients, a lot about working together, the language we use and trying to make sure we communicate effectively, learn from COVID, educate and trust. Where some of that, I'm sure there was others, but they were the sort of main sort of words I heard that really struck me today. So all that leaves me to do is to wrap up now. Say thank you to Detlef, Ewan, Eddie, Nicola, Gerald, thank you, and to our audience for watching. We look forward to meeting you virtually throughout the rest of the day, and please do use the networking platform to connect with us throughout the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Jeff.